And we are back. Welcome in to the debut episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets, the NFL's premier reality drama series. New show. Alongside Teddy Pristash, I am Blake Pace. Out with Chasing 69. We've grown up, we've matured, we've got a new show on the block, something that is age appropriate and feels comfortable to share with your friends and family. Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at KUWTNYJ. I will get that down at some point. It's kind of the same abbreviation, taking a little spin off from the Kardashians, because the Jets really are the Kardashians of the NFL. I mean, it's just always drama going on with these guys. So we thought the name was fitting, thought it was the time to make the change. Great to start off the offseason talking all of this stuff. Teddy, it's been a couple months now since we've done this. Excited to be back. How are you? Are you excited about the new name, the new show? Talk to me.
Doing good, man. Doing good. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to dive back in. The Jets really made me just hate thinking about them the whole end of last season. But I'm ready to recommit to them, ready to dive back in and really give it my all. And yeah, excited about the name. During that intro, I kind of thought you were gonna say keeping up with Chasing 69, just because I'm so used to hearing you say that. But no, it's good. The name Chasing 69 was a name that I came up with, and we decided to go with it. And immediately I was like, we probably should have brainstormed just a little longer. We probably could have come up with something. But hey, you live and you learn. I enjoyed it. It was great. What did we do? 2 years with it?
Yeah,
So yeah, here we are, keeping up with the New York Jets. I think, I don't know. Not
it's
much else will change, but it's gonna be
exactly
awesome.
same show, but a much more fitting name, especially when talking about a team that, and we'll go through today. I mean, today's podcast basically like, what have we missed in the last 2 months? It's
Yeah, it's the
all
best reality
drama.
show in sports. It's the New
Exactly.
York Jets.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. So, Teddy, there's so much to kind of go
Let's dive
over.
in.
Let's get right into it. I think some of the biggest things that we missed ever since our last show, our final one, is Chasing 69. Um, you know, the big story, and these kind of that have been so far out, so far removed now, a couple months, we can kind of breeze through the big points of it because everybody else has probably already spent a ton of time talking about it.
Yeah.
But the biggest one that came out after the season or toward the end of the season was The Athletic dropping a massive hit piece, essentially doubling down on the piece they had published mid-season about all the turmoil going on within the Jets. A lot of it centered around offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, some of it being about Aaron Rodgers as well, too. And it didn't, shy away from some Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas talk as well, too. The big quote that was taken is, "It's just such a fucking mess," which, as we watch the season, fall apart, it makes a lot of sense. The biggest points that come out was, if you want to hit one from every level, an anonymous AFC general manager came out and said that Joe Douglas was basically the assistant general manager to Aaron Rodgers, who was serving as the GM. We saw that play out last offseason with a lot of moves that were brought in, a lot of guys brought in that really didn't have an impact on the season. There was the Robert Saleh threatening to collect cell phones of his staff members after there were leaks coming out about Zach Wilson and um, his inability or, the lack of desire to come back and play for the Jets to finish out the season. Was whining about how he could potentially become Vic Fangio, this other great defensive mind that, head coaching career just tanked because of a lack of good quarterback play, kind of doing this whole woe is me thing before it was even really, put on the market that he was going to be canned. Obviously, he's brought back for another season, but they painted it out to be a paranoid head coach. If you want to just hit the other ones, Aaron Rodgers was, preaching how he was going to be Zach Wilson's big brother the entire season. As soon as the injury happens and he goes to California, there was basically zero communication between Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers when Wilson probably needed it most, jumping in to beat the starter for the majority of the season. And a whole lot of stuff about Nathaniel Hackett not being prepared. Where do you want to start with this one? It was a big piece. It was 30 anonymous sources, from players to coaches to front office guys to other, teams. What are you going
Yeah,
to remember with all this?
Obviously there's a lot, and I think those three things you just said were kind of like the big, like, whoa, like those were like the little snippets that were put out. Those were like the big kind of like, God, this was such a dumpster fire. And don't get me wrong, that's very fair. Like, it was certainly a dumpster fire. As I was reading this article the first time, it kind of was just like, obviously you don't love to read it, but it's like we did just watch this all play out, and so it's kind of like all the things that we were kind of like, was that going on? Is that really happening? Like, they were all kind of true, or at least a lot of them. And obviously, um, things could be like, not everything maybe is as like good or bad as it was portrayed, but at the end of the day, when those things are coming out, like, they were happening and we were watching them happen, so unfortunate for sure. I guess my what like hits home with me the most is just the I guess like lack of confidence that we or anyone can really have in the Jets coaching staff at this juncture. I think we're in a really funny time period right now for the Jets because we just did this whole big offseason where, we got Aaron Rodgers. We believe we were back. We believe we're Super Bowl contenders, all these things. And obviously, him going down was unexpected, but we reverted 100% back to what we'd always been, despite having a great defense, just a completely horrible offense, couldn't do anything at all. And that gives you pause when you think about bringing back Robert Saleh, bringing back Nathaniel Hackett. Like, if you can't have a functioning offense, you're not going to be able to be a successful football team. And I think that's what really, at least like worried me the most reading this is, the like lack of planning, lack of involvement from Saleh, which is expected, but also like when you're that bad, you need to be involved. Nathaniel Hackett, like, not meeting with his assistant coaches till late in the week, not adjusting his game plan for different strengths and weaknesses of the other team and things like that. Like, those are the things that really worry you. Again, we're in a place with the Jets where it does feel like we've improved the roster. It does feel like we've drafted well. It feels like we've kind of like made the correct moves, but then for some reason it's not working out on the field. And all this shit showness, clearly doesn't help. And that's kind of what like 100% needs to be addressed, or else we're like, if it's as dysfunctional as it was this year, even with Aaron Rodgers, I would foresee next year kind of falling apart and everyone being let go, So they got to figure out this type of shit. But yeah, not the best article about your team.
And it was
What I
so
will say,
Mhm.
real quick, if you compare it to the New York Giants hit piece that came out on Dable, I think theirs was a little worse.
Yeah,
That's my
yeah.
one positive spin.
Dable was put under a lot of, and it's so funny because
There's a
you
lot of,
compare the
honestly,
Giants and
there's so
Jets.
many. You can
Like
go ahead, but
the
there's so
Giants
many of these hit passes that come out.
the Giants get kind of like an easy ride compared to the Jets. And maybe it's just like they've got two Super Bowls this century, that they can kind of lean their hat
Yeah.
on and be like they but like you're right. The Jets really, I feel like you hear way more of, where the Giants are a worse football roster. Had almost as much turmoil between their coaching staff and front office this past year. Dable and Wink Martindale not being able to coexist on a same coaching staff for more than 2 seasons. One being a brilliant offensive mind, the other being one of the most brilliant defensive minds. But there was just I feel like the Giants get a little bit more slack, whereas the Jets, because they are
No, for
such
sure.
a joke of a franchise, maybe it's easier to just keep picking on the little brother.
Yeah. The one anti like rebuttal I'd have to that as a Jets fan, maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, but we do get a little hyped, and every year we think we're going to be great, even though we're not always. It seems, at least from the outside looking in, maybe the Giants are a little bit better at tempering expectations. I'm sure
Yeah,
they have delusional fans just like the rest of us, but maybe it's just like they don't hype themselves up to fall on their face every year quite as much as we do.
they seem to be more of like a professional organization, maybe at least in the fan base, or
Yeah,
there's
or
just like a
even
way
just like
they're carrying
Daniel
themselves.
Jones to me was just kind of like, yeah, he's going to be all right, but he's not going to be like great. Whereas
Yeah.
we're with Zach Wilson and we're like, he's going to be the best. He's the
Yep.
next Patrick
Exactly.
Mahomes for sure. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's kind of like those little differences. Um, but yeah, no, I mean the news that's been coming out of One Jets Drive has not been positive. I guess the only other thing I'd say is, and obviously results are the only thing that matters, especially when you're this deep into your tenures like Saleh and Douglas are. But if you're a losing football team, it's like you're going to come off like it's a clown show, and you need
Yep.
to be able to address those things. And it's something we haven't really been able to address. And that's what we're all looking for from our GM and our coach. And I think the one kind of point of ease I have is like at least, if they blow it again, they're not going to be here next year. And if they don't, like, so it's like you at least know you're going to get that answer this year, as opposed to like, are we going to just keep doing this? Like, and obviously it's not what you want, but it at least does give you a little peace of mind of like, we're either going to figure it out this year or they're going to be gone.
They've been granted a 1 year redo simply because Aaron Rodgers blew out his Achilles on the fourth play of the season. Like that is
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
like the magical elixir for this offseason and them still keeping jobs is the fact that there is still this one guy who could come right in and then they can point to an 11-6 or a 10-7 record next season and say this is what we could have been last year. This is what we were expecting out of this situation. Um, one of the things to then transition to something that was a little bit more recent, a lot of what was talked about was Nathaniel Hackett. And you pointed out too that lack of preparation, that lack of, communication between the offensive staff and Nathaniel Hackett. Mecole Hardman, now Super Bowl champ with the Kansas City Chiefs, he got real chatty on the Pivot podcast. Basically just shitting on the Jets for a decent amount of time there, alluding to lies in the way that the team handled his role in the organization, lack of trust in both special teams coordinator Brant Boyer and offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett. Even at one point, texting the Chiefs general manager Brett Veach and Patrick Mahomes saying, "Come get me," which Joe Douglas was asked about today or yesterday when you're hearing this, or this week when you're hearing this, and he was like, "Yeah, that sounds like tampering to me," which it very much is. So it'll be interesting to see if they pursue any type of investigation into the legitimacy of that. I think Mecole seemed like he was pretty confident the fact that he was doing that. Now he did acknowledge he was pretty checked out at certain points in the season there, and I think there was a whole bit of a change, when you're expected to be brought in for a specific role and the punt returner and an undrafted guy comes in and kind of just earns the job over you. It wasn't like Mecole was this big, $11 million a year wide receiver. He's brought in 4 million and he was supposed to serve a very specific role and he got that role kind of taken from him. He didn't earn it. So what did you think of him coming out and really just putting the Jets on blast there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because clearly it wasn't a flattering like conversation for the Jets, but to me it did like it didn't seem like he was just like fuck these guys, it did kind of just seem like he was expressing what happened and clearly has a lot of issues with Brant Boyer, the special teams coach. But I didn't get to where I was like, man, fuck you, Mecole Hardman. Like you're such a dick. Like it did honestly kind of to me just seem like he was kind of saying what happened. Um, and I think this Mecole Hardman story and aspect of all this is pretty funny because basically what he's saying is they were dishonest about his role, right? And again, we watched this happen in real time during the season and we were very aware. Mecole Hardman came in and was expected to be the starting punt returner and kick returner. We all knew that when they signed him. It was one of the reasons that they signed him. That made sense. And for whatever reason, the Jets coaching staff and Brant Boyer specifically, it seems like trusted Xavier Gibson a lot better than he did Mecole Hardman. And we saw that immediately affect Hardman. He's not playing offensive snaps. He wasn't returning kicks. And very quickly into the season was basically just left for dead on the bench. I don't particularly blame the Jets coaching staff in that aspect of it. Like, obviously you want a staff that's going to be upfront with guys and going to, um, not make promises that they don't intend to keep. But an undrafted free agent coming in and making the roster is not something that people are expecting. So to me, it does kind of just seem like one of those, it was a material change. We liked this guy a little bit better.
Yeah, if you sign on to provide a certain role for a team, you still have to go out there and earn that role. You're still part
Yeah,
of the 53 that's
1000%.
competing for a job, and I think that was what started to piss off other people in the Jets when they saw this is, you know, legend Thomas Morstead comes out and defends his guy Brad Boyer, says, "Be careful getting information from disgruntled former employees. Getting beat out by a rookie free agent after being guaranteed millions of dollars is tough to deal with. Entitlement is a killer of opportunity. You have to earn it every year." Sauce Gardner had a quote, Tweety then deleted it,
Yep.
kind of just being like, "Yep, sounds about right." Um, was it Garrett? No. It was Sauce. Sorry, not Garrett. I didn't mean to say Garrett. It was
You
Sauce
said
that came out.
sauce.
Oh, I did say it? Okay, gotcha, good.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Uh,
kind of just coming to the defense saying like you lost your job, understandably pissed about it, but the way that you're going about speaking is a
right.
little out of pocket.
And so Mecole Hardman then loses his job and admittedly says on this podcast he was on that he was like mentally checked out. He was probably frustrated. And once Xavier Gibson was injured, they asked Mecole Hardman to return kicks, and he said no. He said, "I'm not doing that." And like to me, that's where you lose all like credibility to me as Mecole Hardman. Um, just because it's like, dude, exactly what you just said. Like, you're in the NFL. Like, you signed on to this team. We're calling your number, and you're not going to respond. Like, it just really leaves a bad taste in your mouth. Um, and like this all happened so early. He was traded after we beat the Eagles. You know what I mean? So like the season hadn't even become a dumpster fire by the time Mecole Hardman was traded. Or no, that's actually not true. It was later in the season, but he basically stopped playing. Um, but I walk that back. I don't think it was as early as I'm making it seem. Um, but my whole takeaway with Mecole Hardman, right, is like this kind of goes in line with that hit piece, right? And people are going to take what they hear and run with it. That man, it really seems like the Jets have this like dysfunction in their coaching staff. To me, there were plenty of bad things in that hit piece that worry you, right? Mecole Hardman losing his job to an undrafted free agent who performed very well in that role as a returner, won us a game in week 1 against Buffalo, like, and then getting mad about it, admitting he checks out, and then getting traded, like, that's not something that makes me think, like, man, this is a dysfunctional. Like, that is just like sounds like Mecole Hardman should have tried a little bit harder, been more willing to kind of like deal with things. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't connect to like all these other horrible things to me.
The one part that does, because I agree, totally different situations, is this quote about Nathaniel Hackett, which is essentially
Yes.
what we were just saying earlier. Quote, the offense is just like, we'll figure it out. It's Aaron's show. Let Aaron do what Aaron does. Then when Aaron goes down, it's like, we don't know what to do. Basically, just saying what we all witnessed is as soon as Aaron Rodgers went down, there was no continuity in the offense. There was no preparation week to week. There was no adjustments made, and thus the offense fell apart. So, if we're doing the common denominator here, which we've said from the start, and look, I was a big fan of Nathaniel Hackett joining the New York Jets. And I will still say to the end of this, if that is what got Aaron Rodgers to want to join the New York Jets, positive move. If it is just the fact that Aaron Rodgers wants an offensive coordinator that will shut up and let Aaron do what Aaron wants to do, Aaron has earned that right in my respect. I likened it multiple times to when Tom Brady goes to Tampa Bay. He's running Bruce Arians' offense. The first 6 weeks they look flat. Tom Brady goes to Bruce Arians and says, "We need to switch up the offensive playbook to what I know best." They go on and they win a Super Bowl that year. It's that simple.
Yeah.
If this is the offense that Aaron wants to run and that's what brought him to New York, sure. I may have to walk back that I think he's a good offensive coordinator. I'm okay to say that I was wrong in certain areas. I was maybe fooled by the back-to-back MVP performances from Rodgers with him in Green Bay. But I got a year to I'll let Aaron Rodgers make me feel better about Nathaniel Hackett next year.
Yeah.
But that this is clearly a huge issue for the Jets, not just in terms of this window right now, but like God forbid that Aaron Rodgers misses time in 2024. There's no way that
Right.
they can comfortably think that Nathaniel Hackett can lead this offense in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that is where like I think most Jets fans' frustration is, at least mine personally, is basically the biggest takeaway from all of this, right? Is the Jets went into the season and were 100% Aaron Rodgers is going to help fix so many of our problems. And unfortunately he got injured and that wasn't able to happen. And so, like you just said, and I say if Aaron Rodgers is able to be healthy next year and he knows how to call the right plays and work with Nathaniel Hackett and get, all different players involved and run the offense. If Aaron Rodgers is the de facto offensive coordinator and that works, like, hey, I'm all for it. Give it to me. We can keep Nathaniel Hackett. It just sucks to think like we have a guy who, if we don't have Aaron Rodgers, is not going to be able to be successful. And, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Nathaniel Hackett has put together 2 years in a row where the only possible way he would still remaining like have an offensive coordinator job in the NFL is because of this situation with Aaron Rodgers. Like there's no other world where he would keep his job, like get a job last year and keep his job this year. So that sucks, and if other people want to clown us for that, and if it ends up biting us in the ass, like you know, Nathaniel Hackett hasn't shown us anything, but we're keeping him around because of Aaron
Yeah,
Rodgers.
the Jets
Like that
deserve
is the
it.
takeaway.
If people want to shit on us
Yeah.
for it, they are very much right
Yeah.
to do so.
Yeah.
Only last thing that I wanted to see, did you see Kenny, our boy Kenny Yeboah, in his comments about this whole Mecole
I did
situation?
not.
Oh,
I did
great one.
not.
So he quote tweeted this, the Thomas Morstead tweet, and said, "I like this OG." And then someone replied and was like, "Hey Kenny, how do you feel about Mecole?" Kenny goes, "He's tripping out. He ain't talk about his own work ethic and how the Georgia Eagles got our game plan." Mecole Hardman,
Yo,
Georgia
yes.
athlete. Eagles,
And
full team of Georgia athletes.
and this is what I thought you were going to say before Sauce Gardner
Yes.
tweeted in a now deleted tweet. And he doesn't specifically say anything, but he says like basically like, and I don't even want to bring up that someone leaked our game plan to the Eagles, basically blaming Mecole Hardman, it seems, at least, which would be crazy.
Very
Um,
interesting.
it would be crazy if that was true. And it's hilarious that if the Eagles had our game plan and we're still able to lose to Nathaniel Hackett and Zach Wilson, like that's hilarious.
Hilarious.
Um, the last thing again, I know you just said that about Mecole Hardman, just to circle back to the fucking tampering thing. So he says on his podcast, he says, I had talked to the GM, I had talked to Pat, the Chiefs
Come
GM and
get
Patrick
me.
Mahomes, and was like, come get me, like, what are you guys doing? Like, come get me. And clearly that would be tampering if true. Mecole Hardman, puts out a tweet basically saying he had no contact with them, but said it very clearly on the podcast that that's what happened. Who knows what's going to happen with this? But if it's found to be true that there was tampering, we would get a compensatory draft pick. So that could be awesome for us.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mecole.
you definitely have to
Thank
explore
you
and
for talking shit on
investigate.
your podcast. Yeah,
Exactly.
and that
Like
was
you,
what Joe Douglas in his press conference today was his quote was like, we took notice of that, or like that definitely stuck out to something like that, where it's like, all right, let's see what happens.
yeah, yeah, very interesting situation, and still just kind of what started with the athletic piece ties a little bit together with the Mecole and is just like, I think one of the things that we can do a good job from this point on is just acknowledging last year was an utter shit show. It
Sure.
completely fell apart from the very first second that Aaron Rodgers went down. We have no idea how it would have worked out if he was still there, and hopefully next year will tell us the story and we can get a true evaluation. But it was just a shit show, and like that's
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we could spend a lot of time really harping on last year, but at the end of the day, I think we just have to kind of
Time to look ahead.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
I just the only other thing I don't think we plan to talk about this otherwise, but the like grading came out today.
oh, I did have
Basically
that. I
like
had
on
that at
all the
the
different
end.
types of facilities.
I
Okay,
have this at
all
the
right.
end. I put
We
it
can
in at
touch
the
on
end,
that
so we
then.
could touch on it there because I have a
All
do
right,
you care
perfect.
segment that we'll just zip
Love
through at the
that.
end.
Little tease. Yeah.
Um, quick thing to go through. I don't think we need to spend too much time for it, but there were a few changes on the front office and coaching staff. Rex Hogan, assistant general manager, was let go from the Jets. Had previously been with the Jets in 2016, 2017, took a job with the Colts, then went back to the Jets, was basically Joe Douglas's right-hand man. Apparently was the big name pushing for Zach Wilson to be the number 2 selection. Had strong ties to BYU and the state of Utah as well, too. Samini had a quote in an article I was reading the other week. An executive from another team who knows Hogan personally theorized it may have been a factor in letting him go, which is just, it's funny to then be like, this guy likes Zach Wilson. So 5 years later, 4 years later, now we've
Yeah.
decided to part ways.
That's a hilarious quote too, because it's an executive from another team theorized. You know,
Yeah,
like it's completely
they
not
did.
based in like not saying it's not true, but like that quote is just like, hey, it could be a thing, you know?
Could be. Yeah,
And also, number one, that blame still goes on Joe Douglas for like if I'm sure Joe Douglas also liked Zach Wilson, and plenty of other teams also like Zach Wilson too. So if this is the one reason we fired him, I don't know if that's making a
yeah.
ton of sense to me.
Exactly. Another one, director of player personnel, Chad Alexander. He left to be the Chargers assistant GM. Not that it's, changes are going to happen. And I think this is what you were saying when we were texting about this too, is like, if you're a bad team, changes are going to be made. It is tough to see basically the number 2 and number 3 in the pecking order of the front office, both gone in the same offseason, but hopefully the right shoes are there to fill it in. And I still do at the end of the day. This was my thing. I would have been fine if they had moved on from Saleh. I wanted them to keep Joe Douglas. As long as he's the top guy there, I still think giving him another crack this offseason to right some wrongs on this roster is a good way to go about it. But it is a little shaky to see, number 2 and number 3 both gone essentially in the same offseason.
Yeah, what I believe I saw an article that described it as a mass exodus
Yeah.
of the
It's so
Jets front
dramatic.
office and coaching staff. But I mean, it's fair. It's a ton of turnover. You can obviously point to all these like bad things that have been coming out and believe that it's a factor. I also just think this was the type of season where, a lot of people would have lost their jobs in other situations. It worked out where we wanted to have that continuity with the GM and the coaching, like head coach and offensive coordinator, but that doesn't mean that they weren't going to make changes elsewhere. So it's not surprising to me, like regardless of whether it was people wanting to leave or letting people go, um, there was going to be a bunch of changes, So
Yeah.
we'll see if that can help right some wrongs.
Yeah, and to the same extent on the coaching staff as well too. Rob Calabrese was the quarterbacks coach. He took an offensive assistant job with the Rams. Kind of seemed like a mutual parting of the ways at the time. I mean, I can't say that with Nathaniel Hackett and a new offensive system in there, Aaron Rodgers basically running I don't know that maybe there was necessarily a strong connection between Calabrese and him. But he now goes and joins LaFleur with the Rams now. Mac Brown, he was an offensive assistant this year. He took the tight ends coaching job with the Seattle Seahawks under new coach Mike McDaniel. Couple other smaller changes. The Jets, running back coach Taylor Embry, he took a running back's position with the New England Patriots. In comes Tony Dews as the Jets running back coach. He was previously the running backs coach and tight ends coach with the Titans over the last 6 years with Mike Vrabel. And then a return from the Gase era, Sean Jefferson, who was wide receivers coach for a few years in the previous tenure, is now back as the wide receivers coach for the Jets this season. So, couple of changes, couple of shifts, all seems to be on the offensive side of things, which is where you would make the
Yeah, it makes a
changes if
ton of
you were the
sense.
Jets this offseason. So I can't say that I can disagree or argue with too much. It is so funny seeing kind of the culmination of the Titans offensive staff kind of taking form here. Todd Downing, Keith Carter, now the running backs
Yeah.
coach, Tony Dews. It's like we're just what's up with Tennessee? Why are we taking all of their old castaways on
My
offense?
well, my only worry is like is for this running backs coach. Like, I hope he just doesn't join the like Arthur Smith type of list where it's like, how many jobs is Derrick Henry gonna get people and for how
Yeah.
long? You know, like
Yeah.
him being like basically the best running back in the league and crushing for as long as he has. Um, Helped get Arthur Smith a head coaching job. Probably gave the Jets you know, ease of mind to say, hey, we can go hire this guy. So we'll
Or
see.
is Derrick Henry the new running back two behind Brees Hall? How about Thunder and Lightning right there for you?
That would be crazy, but I mean, hey, hopefully it would work out better than Dalvin Cook as our Thunder and Lightning.
Yeah.
We did try to sign the
Did
the aging legend last year. It didn't work
oh
out as well,
god.
but
Nah, Tractor
you
Cito's
know,
built different.
yeah, I agree. He's the goat.
Um, yeah, so that's anything with the staff. I think those were pretty, you know,
No, I'll be interested to see what they do at quarterback coach, just because like it seems like Aaron Rodgers will have so much say
Tim
there,
Boyle.
and
Tim
it's
Tim
got to
Boyle
be yeah.
probably. He'll
Well, it's got to
retire and
be
become
funny
the
to get
quarterbacks coach.
hired. 90% of the coaches that you're going to hire are probably younger than Aaron Rodgers, or at least like within his age range, and way less experienced in the way of the NFL. You know,
Yeah.
like I doubt you're going to be hiring a quarterbacks coach that's been around for 20 plus years. So it's just like such an interesting dynamic when you have kind of that like Hall of Famer as your quarterback.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting.
Especially at that point in his career where he's at the tail end. It's not like you're not
Right.
tinkering too much with Aaron Rodgers' game at this point in his
Yeah, you're not
career.
changing his fundamentals. You're not
No.
having to work on footwork, like things like that. So
Yeah. I think the more fun note to look at is some of the roster changes that have either been leaked and aren't officially happening for a little bit or have already happened as well too. Laken Tomlinson, this one did officially happen. He was cut. It frees up 8.1 million this offseason. The former Pro Bowl left guard, Pro Bowl
yeah,
for one season with San Francisco, signed a 3-year lofty deal with the Jets. It was kind of look, they were looking to make moves and names, and he was the top available guard in that free agent class. He came in, and it was an up and down, but mostly down. Um, how will you remember the Laken Tomlinson era in
yeah,
the
not
NFL?
well. I mean, I remembered it with a ton of expectations that just seemed to be, not met. Was he here for 2 years or three?
This was his second season
Yeah,
with the
that's what I
Jets, I
thought.
believe. Let me just
And
double
yeah, that
check,
was
but
basically the problem with Lakin. Is the past 2 years it's been, hey, we have this guy who's supposed to be solid, and even after his first year 2 years ago, um, I remember you kind of were like, hey, I'm a little worried about this guy, and I was like, hey, he's a veteran. I think he's going to be able to improve from what he put out the year before, and honestly, it seemed like he was even worse this season. Um,
yeah.
this was a name I was happy to let go. I was expecting it, and I immediately enjoyed like all the Jets reporters and media will just go out of their way to like make the Jets look bad, and they immediately I saw a few people just criticizing this move, and it's like, dude, he's been so bad for 2 years. Like, why would we keep him around to be the starter just because it's like, hey, well, our line's pretty bad and he's, like I get it, but it's try with someone else who's bad. Don't just do the same thing over and over again.
At the money he was at, I get the move of doing
Especially,
it. I
yes,
will
yes,
say there is something to be said about a guy that if you go back to 2018, 16 starts in 16 games, 16
yeah,
starts in 16 games, 16, 17, 17, 17 for the Jets offensive line that dealt with 13 different combinations this year. Um,
yeah.
I do get the
That's a
fact of
reliable
like
trait.
there is a guy that was out there all the time, but also when he was out there, it was pretty bad. I think what I'll remember is it, and I'll try and remember this for free agencies to come. If you are a castaway pick and you land somewhere and you're still up and down, and then one of the greatest left tackles of all time signs with your team and is next to you, and you go and make a Pro Bowl the next season, maybe you weren't that good. Maybe you just benefited from having Trent Williams at left
Yeah.
tackle And then that saw your rise up on the left side of the offensive line. That is one thing that I think when I was trying to talk myself into the Laken Tomlinson signing, because he was a fresh off a Pro Bowl. He was considered one of the better options in free agency, but we just didn't look at the context of like, oh, how did this guy randomly just turn into a legit guy? Oh,
Yeah,
Trent
sure.
Williams signed as his left tackle. That's what we could have been like, oh duh. Maybe we need a larger survey size or sample
Right.
size of performance at a high level.
And don't get me wrong, like if things had gone better around Lakin over the past 2 years, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. You know what I mean? Like you just said, we had 13 offensive line combinations last year. We've had Mekhi Becton, who's supposed to play next to him, get injured 2 years in a row. Yeah, Dwayne Brown get injured. Yeah, you know what I mean? So like it's not like it's not like he couldn't have succeeded, but now that we're in year three and it already hasn't worked out, like you said, at that money, it's time to move on, try again with someone else, you know? So
Yep.
that's what we're doing.
Yep, and one of those names you mentioned is also no longer with the Jets too. Four players had the rest of their remaining contracts voided. That is Carl Lawson, Dwayne Brown, as you mentioned at left tackle, Quentin Jefferson, and safety Jordan Whitehead. Um, they will count as 15.8 million against the cap next year. So I guess if you want to look at these moves along with the Lakin signing, you basically are hitting with a dead cap of around 7.5 million essentially for five guys that you're letting
Sure.
go. But these are names that,
But you're saving money overall by them
yes,
not
you are
being on your
saving
roster.
money
You have more
overall.
money to play
Definitely.
with. Yeah.
Definitely. And these are guys that,
Jordan Whitehead's the only name here that you could say, hey, I would have maybe liked to keep him around. He's been
yep.
up and down, but decent as a starter.
Hmm.
I mean, Lawson, Dwayne Brown. Like Dwayne Brown was healthy last year and
And
couldn't be a starter. You know
yeah.
what I mean? He was playing swing tackle and things like that. He's going for retirement almost 100%. Carl Lawson, I mean, the downfall was sad, but completely lost all production. And then Quentin Jefferson, another guy, didn't get a ton of burn. Um, so yeah, fine with those.
Yeah, I would have liked to have kept Jordan Whitehead around, but same thing for the money. I don't think it's safety, a non-premium position. I don't think the money that he was going to be working with the remainder of the contract necessarily made sense. I think
Yeah.
that safety is a position where you can draft young or kind of take flyers on random guys. You don't need to be, one of the highest paid safeties or on the higher end of being paid as a safety if you're getting up and down play. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned from all of this is if you win free agency, you do not win free agency. And we've talked about this at a few different points, but this is
I
like to
like
me
that.
the nails in the coffin here. Like this is if you are getting the best crop of free agents, here's the thing. Those are most likely the third tier of free agents to be available in the class because the first tier, they get franchise tagged or maybe they get the first tier you could say they probably get the long-term extensions with their team.
Right. They get deals.
Tier two gets at least the franchise tag. And then after that, look, man, there's a lot of
Guys, they're
money
not
to
willing
go
to
around
pay.
to 53 guys. Like there are guys that if you have a talented player, you are keeping them within your organization. That's why the Bengals franchise tag T. Higgins. They may trade him, but they're at very least going to get something in return from franchise tagging him. The Colts came out and said today they will either get a long-term extension with Michael Pittman or he will be playing under the franchise tag next year. You do not let good players outside of your organization because they are hard to find and it's a 53-man roster and you need as many talented players as possible. This isn't the NBA where you can stock load two or three guys and try and win a title. You need quality players at every single position. So we got really excited in that offseason. Laken Tomlinson, Jordan Whitehead. We loved Carl Lawson. They were let go for certain reasons. Now, there are situations where guys can be available. That same Carl Lawson class, um, Trey Hendrickson goes and signs with did he sign with the Bengals yeah, he signed
Bengals.
with the Bengals from the Saints. He's been great. There are those situations. But I think we need to, as a constitution for us, when we head into this offseason, if we patch together some bigger name signings and a little bit tougher with the cap this year, where the Jets are sitting at, they've got a lot of money tied up to a lot of places, but we need to remind ourselves that they are free agents for a reason.
Yeah. It's almost, yeah, just, and there's obviously some good free agents, but it's like the teams that are number one on the who won the offseason for some reason are always still bad. Us,
Yep.
So yeah, we can maybe not freak out so much when the Jets don't get the number one guys in the class or at certain positions. I like that. Winning free agency is actually losing free agency. I
Yep.
enjoy that
Yep.
sentence.
Anything else with these players that are no longer around? I know there's one bigger conversation. I think the most important piece for the Jets moving forward in free agency, but anything with
Yeah, no, I
Brown,
mean,
Lawson.
we'll definitely cover, free agency and obviously the draft a ton going forward. But yeah, just getting started with these voided contracts and guys getting cut, clearing up cap space. Kind of getting ready for things to get moving.
Yeah, yeah, and I think as we look forward, there's a few contract restructures that the Jets can do to continue to free up more money. I think the biggest names were C.J. Mosley, and then there was someone on offense that was due
Aaron
up.
Rodgers is one where I think he's due like 17 million, but I think it's another situation where they can basically just make it all a signing bonus or like
Gotcha.
and they can kind of or at least they can move it around basically however they want. So they have options, and I'm not going to pretend to fully understand the cap because we all know the cap isn't real,
And it took
but
a
they do have
massive
plenty of
jump.
options.
And it
Yeah,
took a
big
massive
big
jump this
jump.
year.
And they have a lot of options to make things happen. Um, and we obviously have holes on offense, especially, but I do still think this is a team that does have a lot of talent on it. And it's not like we need to build, from the ground up. I do think there is still that core. Um, so I still definitely have high expectations that they're going to be able to piece together a couple decent free agents and, you know, fill out some of these holes. The offensive
Yeah.
line is going to be a big focus, and we'll see if they're able to add a receiver. They've been trying to add a big name there for 2 to 3 years, it seems. So
Yeah, with the offensive line, it was interesting hearing Joe Douglas talk about it today when we're recording this at his press conference. He was like, "There's three ways where you can attack the offensive line: trade, free agency, and draft." And I think we need to shorten that down to two because I don't know what situations guys are giving up quality starting offensive linemen. It was one of the biggest areas of need this entire past season. So many teams, it was like, "What's their biggest weakness? The offensive line." It's like
yeah,
there is a lack of quality depth and overall talent at that position. You really need to go find diamonds in the rough in free agency. You need to trust your coaching staff to develop guys, and you need to nail it in the draft too. Now, thankfully, this is a relatively deep offensive line draft class, especially at the tackle position. The Jets are sitting at pick 10, and we have 2 full months essentially to discuss how they can go about attacking that in the draft. But I heard him say trade, and I was just like, I don't know if we're getting quality starters in trade unless we are then giving up a quality position
right.
that
We'd have to give up a
another
good
team
player.
needs. Exactly. So, I think, like you said, they're trying to free up more room. And there are ways that they can do it, just like every team can, because the cap isn't real at the end of the day. But the biggest name that is going to kind of keep us just waiting around is Bryce Huff, which was one of the lone bright stories of this season. Obviously there was also Quincy Williams, at the linebacker position, some other guys, Joe Tippmann coming along at the end of the year. But Bryce Huff's ascension into being one of the better pass rushers in football in terms of just pressure rate. The numbers were all great for him this season. He is due to walk into free agency, and the Jets are going to let him. There's not a franchise tag situation for him. Joe Douglas today in his press conference, obviously Bryce is an outstanding player. He deserves his opportunity to see where he is in the open market. The plan right now is to not franchise tag Bryce. There's going to be productive conversations with his agent. The Athletic then also reported today that his market could land in the range of 14 to 16 million per year, which is definitely up there when you're a team that needs to add three pieces along the offensive line, wide receiver depth, maybe some more pieces on defense outside of the edge position. One, where do you land of their approach with Bryce Huff? Because they did not try and pursue a contract extension with him this season, which to me was kind of not foolish, but I just didn't understand it because I get Bryce maybe just didn't want to at all, but I would have at least made an attempt to try and keep him around, and not let him test the market, because there will be a team, especially with this jump in cap, where you can just say, fuck it. If he's the best name out there at edge, let's just go and beat what the Jets can't match.
Yeah.
Bryce has said he's not going to take a hometown discount at different points throughout this season. So, what do you think of the decision and their approach to it? And then also, where do you land on the Jets? Do you want Bryce Huff back next year if that's going to be the price
Yeah.
tag?
No, I think the answer there is yes. Like, obviously, depending on what their plan is with offensive line and signing wide receivers and all that stuff, like maybe it's not in the budget. To me, though, like my initial reaction to all the conversation around Bryce Huff was just like, why are we just all assuming he's not like we're not going to be willing to pay him? Like, Jermaine Johnson was awesome last year. Like Bryce Huff was our best edge rusher. Like I truly think that's true. And he's been a guy. I think 2 years ago he played under 20% of snaps. This year he's under 45% of snaps. Like he has been productive as hell, and he does deserve to get a payday. If a team's gonna be willing to pay it, go get your money because he's been that good. Um, in terms of the approach, I mean, I would have loved to sign him in the regular season as well. I saw something today that basically you know, rumored to the fact that Bryce Huff really just isn't all that interested in coming back to the Jets. He wants to go somewhere where they're going to give him a bigger role. He wants to go somewhere where they're going to, play him more than 40% of the snaps and things like that, which I think is fair. That potentially is a reason why we didn't see anything happening in the regular season. If he was just like, listen, like I want to test the open market, he's been that good that he is going to get his payday. Um, but I mean, I would love to have him back. I think he was outstanding. I understand we drafted Will McDonald. I don't think that like just because we drafted a guy in the first round, that means we shouldn't keep around this great player who just happens to be at the same position. Um, and there was like initial speculation that his number would be a little higher than this, like around 20 million. If it's 14 to 16, perhaps that changes things and they are able to keep him around. Will they? I would guess no, just based on what I saw today. But I, I think Bryce Huff has been outstanding. I would love to have him back.
Yeah, it almost seems like their approach is like, well, we didn't invest a high pick in him, so losing him for, not, it's like we got all
Right.
this production, but at the same time, it's like, don't you want to keep the guy that you
I don't
molded
know why.
into
Yeah,
this
like him
great
and
edge
Jermaine
rusher?
were. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. He's only 25. He's a great player. Like if the answer is just we're not going to be able to afford him, then like so be it. But like okay, so we lose Carl Lawson, we lose Bryce Huff. Okay, so our starting edge rushers are Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson. Like, all right, Will McDonald better be able to step right in. Like
Yeah.
obviously we're all rooting for that, but to me, Bryce Huff's not just this guy that like we should immediately dismiss as like, hey, nothing. And Joe Douglas said today they had productive conversations. I'm sure he would have said that kind of regardless. Who knows how real that is?
Yeah.
But I'm certainly rooting for Bryce Huff to be a Jet next year because I think he's that good.
Yeah, we just had this talk about how good players don't get into free agency. If we think Bryce Huff is a good player, just like
Right.
letting him test the open market, it kind of just, I don't know. Maybe the Jets just have faith in their development at that position. And look, I trust the Jets defensive side of things on the coaching staff and the player
Yeah,
development
sure.
over there far more than I do the offense. So maybe they think that, whether it be guys they bring in through free agency or the draft in the late rounds, because that's the thing too. It's like where we're standing right now, there's no second round pick, with the Aaron Rodgers trade. So they're already working with they don't have one of their top premium picks in this draft class. They have to go heavy at offensive line. Like I'll be stunned if that first round pick is anything but an offensive lineman. And
No, yeah.
it's just like you gotta I would worry about losing a guy like that just for nothing, just not being able to even get
Yeah.
anything out of it.
I hope that we start to see the narrative shift. I do think Joe Douglas is a very like timing oriented guy, and
Hmm.
like he's gonna wait till that section of his calendar to be like, okay,
Yeah,
this is where we're working on getting free agents, and that's fine. Again, I think Bryce Huff probably wants to go out on the open market and have these negotiations as opposed to just accepting a deal because he wants to, this may be his only big payday, right? So go get your money. But I am really hoping that the narrative changes from kind of like he's going to be gone to, hey, we're at least trying to get something done with him.
right.
Um, I mean, he fucking balled last year, dude. He
He
was
was
so
great.
good. So good.
Great.
So
Interesting.
sign
Like I
that
said,
man.
we've got a couple weeks until free agency officially kicks off. I was looking at the timing because it's like free agency technically starts on a Wednesday. So I was like, oh, great, record a Tuesday pod to kick off the. But then there's also that 48-hour window where Monday to Wednesday, everybody's really like
Right.
agreeing
They
to
just announce
terms.
it.
Like they've,
Yep.
they've,
Yeah.
they've, they're
Legal
nearing.
tampering
Yeah,
period.
exactly. So
Mecole
it'll.
Hardman.
Yeah, exactly, Mecole. That's when you can text Brett Veach and Pat Mahomes. You fuck. Um,
Yeah.
um, anything else on the Bryce Huff situation? Obviously you can always hope that there's that one, he's back, but two, that you can trust the development at that position. So it'll be interesting to see where but he's the
No, yeah,
number
he's
one
just he's
roster guy right now. Like when you look at the Jets for this offseason,
yeah, he's
like
been the
we have to
biggest
figure out
story,
Bryce
I
Huff
think.
before anything else.
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Yeah.
look, as far as names already in house, like there will be something where a restructure of CJ Mosley or Aaron Rodgers frees up money. And then we can say, look, 14 to 16 million makes a lot of sense for the Jets. Right now, the way their cap is set doesn't make as much sense when you're trying to figure out the fact that there's a left tackle that is needed, there's a right tackle that's needed, there's a left guard that's needed. They're saying with AVT, the next position they put him at, wherever he is playing in 2024, that is his position. They said that today. They're done moving him from guard to tackle, back to guard. Like wherever he lands, he's going to be somewhere. So right now we know we've got AVT and we've got Tippmann, and there's three holes on that offensive line that you have to sort of just piece together in the next 8 months, which is scary for a 40-plus-year-old quarterback. But that's just where we are at this point. And so like that's to
Yeah.
me the big story of this offseason. But as far as in-house names go, Bryce Huff is like the clear guy that's like, is he
No,
staying or is he
definitely.
going?
I think he's been the most intriguing, like roster related story, like through this kind of like pre-off season period. Like that's what everyone's kind of been focused on.
Yeah.
Real quick on AVT, it's hilarious to me that like so many people have wanted to like make him changing roles and like playing like he's gonna be pissed, like they can't just keep flipping him around. And then today he's like, I truly could care less what position I play. Like I'm open to it all. It's like that's a good fucking teammate right there.
Yep, exactly. Because he knows that if he's a guard, he's an all-pro talent guard. If he's a tackle, he's close to an all-pro level tackle. Like he's shown it both that he
Yeah.
can be elite. Now, obviously, if you're a tackle, you make a little bit more money, but we've also seen some guards make some big contracts. He also does need to just stay on the field too. We don't want to like we could say that we've
No,
got
certainly.
AVT
Yes,
and
yes.
Tippmann, but it's like we've got 3.5 linemen to figure out because we do need an insurance policy there on AVT after two very serious injuries to start off his young career. Um, and Tippmann was a rookie too, so maybe we need to sign 8 offensive linemen this offseason. Who the fuck knows? It's going to be really interesting to see how they
Yeah, we
piece
got
this
to sign
together.
Adolf.
They
Sounded like you said Adolf. We got
Oh,
to sign
8 off.
Adolf.
I was like, wait a minute, who the fuck are you bringing in?
Need that Adolf guy.
Damn. All right. Uh, all right. Well, this last thing I was gonna
All right,
run
let's
through.
play Do You Care?
Yeah, I
I'm
was gonna just
excited.
ask you if you
We should
care
play Do
about
You Care a
these.
lot.
Yeah, like just these stories that. Do you care that Deion Dawkins takes a jab at the Jets defense, calls them weirdos that care about social media more than playing football? The big quote: "There's people that play the sport just to try to be cool. I feel like they play the sport to try to be cool. Those are a bunch of dudes that just want to take pictures on Instagram. Meanwhile, he's sitting on this podcast, shirt off, titties hanging. Do you care that
Yeah.
he's taking jabs here at the Jets defense?
Not really. I like care in the way that like I saw it and I was like, hey, don't talk about my team
Yeah,
like
fuck
that,
you. Yeah,
his biggest complaint was like shit talking Josh Allen, which is like, yeah, dude, like we're playing football, like we're
yeah.
gonna shit talk your quarterback.
He doesn't like
Also
Michael
just like
Clemens.
I'm sure, Jets fans didn't like Michael Clemens most of the year, so like that doesn't shock me. Um, but the whole like to go after Michael Clemens and then call them weirdos that only care about social media, and Michael Clemens just doesn't have social media, and like Deion Dawkins like seemingly loves
He's out
doing the
there.
podcast and all
Yeah.
that stuff. It's just so easy. Like Jets fans have just been running with it and roasting him, which has been pretty funny. I'm not too worried about that one just because it seems like we've won most interactions there.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously it's the big rivalry, Jets,
Sauce getting involved,
Bills.
Garrett
Yeah.
Wilson getting involved, everyone's talking shit. Yeah, it's good
It's
rivalry. I'm into it.
exactly, exactly. And the Jets have stolen a few from the Bills recently as well too. So there's a little bit of back and forth
Yeah,
there, at least that you can say that
yeah.
they've got reason to hate each other. Builds up to a fun storyline for next year. I don't care either. I just to put mine out there, I don't really care. It's
Just a
Dion.
fun one, I'd say. Fun off
Exactly.
season.
Raiders GM Tom Telesco kills the Devonta Adams dreams, confirms that the star wide receiver will be a Raider for the 2024 season. Do you care?
Um, Not really. Like, obviously, it would be cool if we had traded for Devonte Adams. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, I might be too early on the giving up on Devonte Adams train, but like the idea of signing these like aging receivers to be great with us just like doesn't really do it for me because I just
Yeah.
assume it's not going to work out. I'm trying to think what the other name is. Devonte Adams isn't going to be available, and
Oh,
another big name.
Justin Jefferson was floated out there for like 20
Oh
seconds.
yeah, and there was yes, yes. Which by the way, Jets fans have just been like, "Oh, he's got Jets in his name," and they put a
Oh
jet
my
next to him, and this
God.
it's like, yeah, that's his nickname.
Jay Jetta.
But I saw a tweet that was basically like Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson both unavailable. Way to go, Joe Douglas. It's like that's not his fault. They're not available. Like you
No,
can't
yeah, what
trade
can
for
you
them.
do? That's
Um,
funny.
so no, I would love like we have Garrett Wilson, who I trust to be a wide receiver one. I would love to sign, a big-ish name. I would love to get like a T. Higgins or a Michael Pittman, who both of those guys are probably going to be franchise tagged, like or have already been franchise tagged, maybe.
Yeah, basically
That would be
those
sick.
guys are staying.
We'll see, but not getting Devontae Adams is not the doesn't. I'd say I care like 2 out of 10.
Yeah, I just think it's to me the care is like we got Aaron Rodgers and we were like, oh, what former guys are we going to bring in? Obviously, the big one is
Yeah,
Devonte Adams,
yeah.
and we've been sitting here with Walmart, Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb. I'm sure this
Devonte
offseason
Adams bought back into the Raiders a ton too with
with Antonio Pierce.
Antonio Pierce being the head
Hmm.
coach and stuff. So
Yeah, and then I mean we can just throw this in here while we're talking about like David Bakhtiari will be a New York Jet. Like when he gets cut from the Packers,
yeah.
he'll be a New
Yeah.
York Jet.
Hopefully he can play
He'll
more than one game.
he'll be there. Yeah, I don't care either. I think I agree. It not only just like would it have been very difficult to pay Devonte Adams his current salary and then also give up the right picks for Devonte. Like they would have been sacrificing basically every other plan for this offseason.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't care either. It would have been cool to get them back together. But it makes sense why the Raiders are going to keep one of the best wide receivers, even though he's a little bit older. Um, the NFL the NFLPA, that's what it is. NFLPA report card came out. The Jets were one of 5 teams to not receive an A, and when that's an A plus, A minus in any category, one of 5 teams in the league. Do you care?
That's not ideal. I might be like so beaten down by the Jets, but I think overall they ranked 21st. I was kind of like, fuck yeah, like right in the mid, like kind of average. Like we're not bottom five, like yeah, we're not top five, but we're not bottom five. I would describe our report card as one that like you don't love, but you don't hate showing it to your parents, like we got all C's and B's. Like we're right in the middle, there's no D's and F's on there.
Yeah.
Um
I didn't show
so
I didn't
so
show my parents a single transcript from college, by the way. They never saw any of that shit for college.
that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean
Never.
I yeah. I I My big takeaway here was the head coach got a B. which I like to see. With everything that the Jets have been through the past the past year, really, I think a lot of people just jump to like Sal is really losing this locker room, the culture is going away, all these things. That's never really quite been what I've seen. Like, there's obviously been problems, but to me, it's always seemed like the players still did have a lot of love for Salah and a lot of like trust in him. And just to see that kind of be validated with that grade was good to see. But other than that, didn't take away too much from this.
I don't know how the grading process works, but there were two Saleh things that he did grade negatively on. Only 72% of players felt like Robert Saleh was efficient with their time. That was 28th overall in the league. And then the players feel that Robert Saleh is somewhat willing to listen to the locker room, which was 29th overall. So those were two areas
Yeah.
that I did see from like the full description he graded low on, but you're right, a B. That was kind of my thought too. I mean, you guys were one above the Colts. The Colts were 22nd, and that a lot of that goes in like facilities and the market that you're into. Like, there's only so much you can control.
Yeah, the owner,
Yeah,
like Woody's
exactly.
never gonna get a great owner grade.
No, he got one of the lowest. I think I'm pretty sure.
I actually
is
think he
what I
got a
saw.
B though.
Oh, I thought he was pretty
I'm not
low on the
sure.
owner. I
I
might be
remember.
wrong.
He could be.
But yeah, I never cared about that either.
We're prepared.
The NFL, like what? There are some that every
Yeah,
time the
so
report card
clearly
comes
we
out,
don't
there's
care
like,
that much.
no. There was one more thing that I didn't
Well,
put on
the
here.
Chiefs
Oh.
got 31st. They just won the
They seem to
Super
be doing
Bowl.
fine. They are doing perfectly fine. One
That's
more
really wild.
Yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, the Dolphins were the only ones that got A's across the entire board. Those motherfuckers.
Yeah. They paid him.
One more. Do you care?
Okay.
Robert Saleh. We've talked about him a lot. We've talked about his, shakiness, whatever. Not really a combine guy. He has skipped out on the combine, I think, every year since he's been a head coach.
So funny.
This is the first time he will be in attendance. However, he is flying in Saturday, skipping all the interviews, all the media availability. He will just be there to evaluate the players. Is missing basically all of the stuff where you'd have to face the front of a camera. Do you care?
Yeah, no, this is one of the crazy. Every year we do this. So many head coaches don't go to the combine. So it shocks me that it's a story every year. It's really funny to me though that everyone just like kind of did the rounds on like Salah's not going to the combine, and then today they're like, yeah, we decided to bring him. We're gonna bring him to the combine. Like, that makes me laugh for sure. The way Joe Douglas said it, like he was like basically like, oh, there's like meetings and stuff that there's opportunities to meet people that we wanted him to be there for, which may be true. But no, I'm not. I will never care if the head coach goes to the combine, because that is a thing that head coaches don't do very often.
Yeah. I don't care either.
And all the interviews they do with recruits, with players, all of those things happen through technology with Zoom now. Like, it's not like he is not going to be involved in all of the meetings and things like that. You know what I mean? Like, if they're meeting with a player, Robert Saleh is going to be there. Obviously not in person, but I'm not worried.
So we went 4 for 4 and do not care, basically, to start this off. I think is what we've landed on.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That'll be stuff I care about eventually, right?
Yeah. We'll get to it. When Bryce Huff leaves, I'll put that in the do you care, and you can say yes.
I know. That's so. It's just weird to me that it's like everyone's just like, yeah, we're not gonna get him. Like he's gonna, and that makes me think it's like he wants to leave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the role thing is a true statement, that makes a lot of sense, because Saleh is gonna go 8 or 9 deep, and that's gonna lower your ability. So Teddy, that'll wrap up the first episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets. A lot of drama.
Fuck yeah.
I think next week we'll be able to get into more free agency stuff, maybe take a look at one or both sides of the ball, and take a look at names that would be good fits. We'll crank it into the draft season after free agency. This is my favorite time of year. We always talk about it, but I love the NFL offseason.
This is where the Jets can win. So I'm in.
Exactly. So that'll wrap a bow on the debut episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets. Make sure to follow Teddy on Twitter at Teddy Huncho. I am at Spring Blake. The show is on Twitter and YouTube at KUWTNYJ. Keeping Up with the New York Jets. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
We're back.